The movie industry is home to some of the most talented women we've ever seen on the screen. But behind the glamour and fame, some faced struggles too heavy to bear. From rising stars full of promise to legendary icons, these are the actresses who took their own lives. Marilyn Monroe was one of the most famous actresses in Hollywood history. She starred in movies like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, Some Like It Hot, and The 7-Year Itch, making her one of the biggest names in the film industry. But behind all the fame and flashing cameras, her life was far from perfect. On the night of August 4th, 1962, Marilyn Monroe died in her home in Brentwood, Los Angeles. She was just 36 years old. Her housekeeper, Eunice Murray, noticed something was wrong in the early hours of August 5th. Marilyn had locked herself in her bedroom and wasn't responding. Murray called her psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson, who broke a window to get inside. That's when they found her lifeless body. The official cause of death was an overdose of barbiturates, a type of sleeping pill. The coroner ruled it as a probable suicide, saying Marilyn had struggled with mental health issues and substance abuse for years. She had been dealing with depression, anxiety, and a career that was starting to fall apart. In the months before her death, Marilyn was facing serious personal and professional troubles. She had been fired from her last movie, Something's Got to Give, because of frequent absences. The studio blamed her for the delays, and her public image took a hit. She tried to turn things around by giving interviews and negotiating new film deals, but it seemed like she was still struggling behind the scenes. Even though her death was ruled a suicide, many people believe there's more to the story. Over the years, conspiracy theories have suggested she might have been murdered, or that it was an accidental overdose. Marilyn's death was truly heartbreaking. But just 3 years later, her close friend Dorothy Dandridge suffered a similar fate. Dorothy Dandridge was a talented actress, singer, and dancer who had the looks, charm, and talent to be a massive star. But because she was a black woman in 1950s America, Hollywood didn't know what to do with her. If she had been born later, she might have had a successful career like Beyoncé. Instead, she spent her life fighting for roles, struggling with love, and dealing with heartbreak after heartbreak. She started as a nightclub singer and dancer, pushed into the spotlight by her ambitious mother. Dorothy refused to play stereotypical roles like maids or slaves, which made it hard to land big parts. But her big break came in 1953 when she starred in Carmen Jones, a film adaptation of the famous opera. She played the fiery lead role so well that she became the first black woman ever nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actress. It should have been the start of something huge. But Hollywood wasn't ready for a black leading lady. Studios still catered to audiences in the segregated South, which meant no on-screen romance between black and white actors. Even when Dorothy starred in Island in the Sun in 1957, her character wasn't allowed to show affection toward her white love interest. With so few opportunities, her career slowly faded. Her personal life wasn't any easier. Her first husband, dancer Harold Nicholas, cheated on her, and their daughter was born with severe disabilities, needing lifelong care. Her long affair with Carmen Jones director Otto Preminger damaged her confidence, and her second marriage ended in disaster. On top of all that, her managers mismanaged her money, leaving her bankrupt. She lost her Hollywood home, had to place her daughter in a state institution, and moved into a small apartment in West Hollywood. By the mid-1960s, Dorothy was working in Las Vegas clubs to pay off her debts. Things seemed to be improving when she signed a contract to make movies in Mexico. But on September 8, 1965, her manager found her dead in her apartment. She was only 42. The cause of death was never fully settled. It was either an accidental overdose of antidepressants or a fat embolism from a foot injury. She had just $2.14 in her bank account. Dorothy wasn't the only actress whose life ended far too soon. Somewhere else across the world, Jean Schonberg was fighting for her life before she lost it tragically. Jean Seberg was a talented actress best known for her role in Breathless, a 1960 French film that helped define modern cinema. She was an American, but she became a star in France, where she spent most of her life. Beyond acting, she was outspoken about social issues, supporting civil rights movements, including the Black Panthers. But this activism came at a high cost. In the late 1960s, the FBI targeted Seberg as part of its secret COINTELPRO program, which aimed to discredit activists. The agency spread a false rumor to the press that she was pregnant with the child of a Black Panther member. The news devastated her. She later revealed that the stress of the lie caused her to go into early labor, and her baby girl was stillborn. Every year, on the anniversary of her daughter's death, Jean attempted suicide. By the late 1970s, her life was unraveling. She struggled with mental health issues and had a history of suicide attempts. On August 30th, 1979, she vanished from her apartment in Paris. Her partner, Ahmed Hasni, said they had gone to see a movie, and when he woke up the next morning, she was gone. He told police that she had been suicidal for a while and had even tried to jump in front of a train a month earlier. 9 days later, on September 8th, Jean's body was found in the back seat of her car, covered with a blanket. The car was parked near her apartment. Inside, police found a bottle of barbiturates, an empty water bottle, and a note written in French to her son. Part of it read, "Forgive me. I can no longer live with my nerves." The police ruled it a probable suicide. John's second husband, writer Romain Gary, blamed the FBI's smear campaign for her death. He believed that the years of harassment, false accusations, and grief over her stillborn child pushed her over the edge. She was only 40 years old when she died. Jean wasn't the only French actress whose death was heartbreaking. Capucine also decided to end it all in the worst way possible. Capucine was a French actress and model, known for her elegance and beauty. She had a quiet charm that made her stand out in Hollywood, even though she never quite reached the same level of fame as some of her co-stars. Behind her sophisticated image, her life was full of sadness. Born as Germaine Lefebvre in Toulon, France, she started out studying painting before becoming a model. She worked internationally, spending time in New York, and eventually made her way into Hollywood in 1959 with a film called Farewell. Throughout the 1960s, she acted alongside big names like John Wayne, Jane Fonda, and Stuart Granger. But even with a successful career, she often spoke about how difficult it was for women in the film industry. She once said that after 30, there weren't many good roles unless an actress was willing to take off her clothes. After spending time in Hollywood, Capucine returned to Europe and continued acting in French and Italian films. Her last appearance was in Curse of the Pink Panther in 1984. But by then, her career had faded, and she slowly withdrew from public life. In the last years of her life, Capucine became a recluse. She lived in Lausanne, Switzerland, in an exclusive apartment building where the actor Yul Brynner had also lived. She was known to keep mostly to herself, preferring the company of her cats and plants. Her friends said she had been struggling with illness and depression for years. On March 17, 1990, at the age of 57, Capucine jumped from her 8th-floor apartment. The police ruled her death as a definite suicide. Her front door was locked from the inside, and she had a private elevator. Capucine had a career that many would envy, but fame never seemed to bring her happiness. The same could be said for Margot Hemingway, a woman born into one of America's most famous families. She had everything, but like Capucine, she was battling demons that no one could see. Margot Hemingway was a supermodel and actress, once one of the most recognizable faces of the 1970s. She was glamorous, tall, and strikingly beautiful, someone who seemed to have everything. But her life wasn't as perfect as it looked from the outside. Born in 1955 in Portland, Oregon, she came from a famous family. Her grandfather was the legendary writer Ernest Hemingway, but that name carried a lot of pressure too. Margot's rise to fame was quick. She became a supermodel almost overnight, signing what was then the biggest contract for a female personality, $1 million to be the face of Fabergé's Babe perfume. Fashion artist Joe Eula even called her the face of a generation. But as much as she was known for her beauty, she also struggled with alcoholism, bulimia, and epilepsy. She eventually tried acting, making her debut in Lipstick, where she starred alongside her younger sister, Marielle Hemingway. But while Marielle went on to have a successful Hollywood career, Margot's acting didn't take off the same way. She found herself fading from the spotlight, and over time, her struggles with addiction and mental health became more apparent. By the mid-90s, Margot had moved into a small studio apartment in Santa Monica, California, near the beach. She wasn't as visible in the public eye anymore, but she was still working. Her last project was narrating a series about animals. Then, on July 1st, 1996, friends who hadn't heard from her since the previous Friday grew worried. They couldn't reach her by phone, and when she didn't answer her door, they got a ladder and climbed up to her balcony. Inside, they found her body. She was just 41 years old. At first, authorities suggested that she might have died from natural causes, possibly linked to her epilepsy. But later, it was confirmed that she had taken her own life. Yet another tragic chapter in the Hemingway family history. Her grandfather, Ernest Hemingway, had died by suicide, and so had several other relatives. Margot's demise was very painful, but Dalita's story will leave you speechless. 5. Dalita was a star, a singer, actress, and icon who captivated audiences across Europe, the Middle East, and beyond. She had beauty, talent, and a voice that could make people feel deeply. But behind all the fame and success, she carried a lot of pain. Born in Egypt to Italian parents, Dalita rose to fame in the 1950s and became one of France's most beloved singers. She sang in multiple languages, from French and Italian to Arabic, and sold millions of records. Dalita's personal life was filled with heartbreak. Many of the people closest to her died by suicide, starting with her fiancé, Luigi Tenco, in 1967. He was also a singer, and when his song was eliminated from a music competition, he took his own life in a hotel room. It was Dalita who found him. The trauma was so overwhelming that just a month later, she attempted suicide herself. She survived, but was never quite the same. More tragedy followed. Her ex-husband, Lucien Maurice, killed himself in 1970. Then, in 1975, her close friend Mike Brandt, a singer she had helped launch into fame, also took his own life. In 1983, her longtime lover Richard Chanfray did the same. It seemed that loss followed her wherever she went. Dalita also had struggles of her own. In 1967, she became pregnant by a young Italian student, but decided to have an abortion, a procedure that left her unable to have children. That was another deep wound that she carried for the rest of her life. Despite all of this, she kept singing, kept performing, and kept smiling for the cameras. But inside, she was suffering. On the night of May 2, 1987, Dalita decided she couldn't go on any longer. She took an overdose of barbiturates at her home in Montmartre, leaving behind a note that simply said, "Life is unbearable for me. Forgive me." She was just 54 years old. Decades earlier, another star, Lupe Velez, had also faced personal challenges that led to a sad and widely misunderstood ending. 4. Lupe Velez was a Hollywood star unlike any other. In the 1920s and 30s, she became one of the first major Latina actresses in Hollywood, starring in both silent films and talkies. People loved her energy and beauty, but behind the scenes, her life was filled with drama, heartbreak, and struggles that ultimately led to a tragic end. On the night of December 13, 1944, Lupe had dinner with some friends, silent film actress Estelle Taylor and another friend named Venita Oki. It seemed like an ordinary evening, but something was weighing heavily on her. In the early hours of December 14th, she went to her bedroom, took 75 Seconal pills, and drank a glass of brandy. Her secretary, Beulah Kinder, found her the next morning. She had passed away in her bed. Next to her, there was a suicide note addressed to her former lover, Harold Ramond. It was heartbreaking. In it, she said she couldn't bring their baby into the world in shame, and that she saw no other way out. On the back of the note, she accused him of pretending to love her when, in reality, he had never wanted their child. Ramond later claimed he had planned to marry her, even though they had broken up. But others said Lupe had realized that his love wasn't real. Some reports suggest she was planning to go to Mexico to have the baby, but in the end, she changed her mind. After her death, rumors started spreading. Some believed she had been struggling with an untreated mental illness, possibly bipolar disorder. Others claimed that the father of her child wasn't Ramond at all, but Hollywood star Gary Cooper, who had once been in a passionate and very public relationship with her. Then came an outrageous and completely false story that turned her death into a dark joke. A writer named Kenneth Anger published a book called Hollywood Babylon, in which he claimed Lupe had tried to stage a glamorous suicide. But after taking the pills, she became sick, ran to the bathroom, slipped, and drowned in the toilet. This version of events has been repeated over and over, even in TV shows and songs, but there's no truth to it. The reality is that Seconal works quickly. She likely lost consciousness within minutes. Lupe Velez was just 36 when she died. Carol Landis was even younger. 3. Carol Landis was a Hollywood actress with beauty, talent, and charm. She started her career in the late 1930s and quickly gained fame, especially after appearing in the 1940 film 1 Million BC. With her striking looks and natural charisma, she became a popular pinup girl during World War II, entertaining American troops and dedicating herself to supporting soldiers overseas. But despite her success, her personal life was filled with heartbreak, and it ultimately led to a tragic end. By the late 1940s, Carol had fallen deeply in love with British actor Rex Harrison. However, Harrison was already married, and he wasn't willing to leave his wife. Carol was devastated. She had hoped for a future with him, but he made it clear that wasn't going to happen. The rejection was too much for her to bear. On the night of July 4th, 1948, Carol and Rex had dinner together. It was the last time anyone saw her alive. Sometime in the early hours of July 5th, she took an overdose of Seconal, a powerful sleeping pill, at her home in Pacific Palisades. The next afternoon, her maid and Rex Harrison found her on the bathroom floor. But instead of immediately calling for help, Harrison waited for hours before finally contacting a doctor and the police. There were 2 suicide notes, one for her mother and another for Harrison. But Harrison reportedly told his lawyers to destroy the note she left for him. When questioned at the coroner's inquest, he denied knowing why Carol had taken her life and even claimed he had no idea about the second note. Carol was only 29 when she died. To this day, some people question the official ruling of her death as a suicide. Her family has raised doubts about what really happened that night. Carol's passing was a devastating one, but Marion A.'s death was just as bad, if not worse. Second, Marion A. was once a rising star in silent films. In the 1920s, she had a promising career, appearing in comedies and even becoming one of Hollywood's first Wampus baby stars, an honor given to young actresses expected to be the next big thing. But unlike some of her peers, her career didn't take off the way she had hoped. Over time, Hollywood moved on, and she found herself pushed further into the background. After she left the film industry, Marion struggled with depression. Acting had been her passion, and without it, she felt lost. In 1935, she attempted suicide by swallowing poison. She survived, but the sadness never really left her. By 1951, she was still fighting the same feelings of despair. On July 10th, she checked into a motel room in Culver City, California. There, she swallowed a handful of bichloride of mercury tablets, a deadly poison. When she was found, she was still barely conscious. Her last words to her husband were heartbreaking. "I dropped one of the tablets on the floor, and I'm afraid the dog will get it." Even in her final moments, she was worried about others. She was rushed to a hospital, but the damage was done. After 11 days of suffering, Marion passed away. She was 48 years old. Her father later revealed that she had been deeply upset about not landing a role in a television play. Marion A. wasn't the only actress who felt abandoned by Hollywood. Peg Entwistle wasn't so lucky either. First, Peg Entwistle had big dreams, just like so many young actors who come to Hollywood hoping to make it big. She was born in England but grew up in the United States, where she found a love for theater. She was talented, too. She performed on Broadway and worked alongside well-known actors of the time. But Hollywood was a different world, and breaking into the film industry wasn't easy. By the early 1930s, Peg was struggling. She had landed a small role in a movie called 13 Women, but it didn't lead to the success she had hoped for. The film didn't do well, and some of her scenes were even cut. It must have felt like a crushing blow. Work was scarce, and the pressures of the industry were intense. On the night of September 16, 1932, Peg left her uncle's home in Los Angeles, telling him she was going out to meet some friends. Instead, she walked to the Hollywood sign. There, she found a workman's ladder, climbed to the top of the letter H, and jumped. For 2 days, no one knew what had happened to her. Then, on September 18th, a woman hiking near the sign found a shoe, a purse, and a jacket. Inside, the purse was a suicide note that read, "I am afraid. I am a coward. I am sorry for everything. If I had done this a long time ago, it would have saved a lot of pain. P.E." The police later found Peg's body at the bottom of the ravine. Her uncle identified her remains after seeing the note in the newspaper. The coroner listed her cause of death as multiple fractures from the fall. Her death is still remembered as one of Hollywood's greatest tragedies.